Good evening, everybody. My name is Zinat Rahman. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute of Politics, and we're so pleased to welcome you to today's conversation featuring four distinguished American mayors for our signature Black History Month event. Before one of our students formally introduces our guests in a few minutes, I'd like to mention a couple of upcoming events that we have at the IOP and just go over some housekeeping. So on Monday, February 20th, come watch three teams, next Monday. Come watch three teams of students compete in the IOP's latest policy challenge. This time, the IOP and the Center for Effective Government have teamed up as students pitch their ideas for making Chicago's transportation system more equitable and more efficient. And that event will be at Ida Noyes Cloister Club starting at 5 p.m. On Tuesday, February 28th, we'll be hosting a conversation exploring immigration and the migrant busing issue with former Congressman and current IOP Pritzker Fellow Beto O'Rourke and Illinois Deputy Governor Saul Flores. That event will take place here at iHouse at 5:30. After today's discussion, we'll open the floor up to take questions from you in the audience, and please feel free to line up to ask your questions at the microphone, which will be placed on the first floor right in the middle. And as usual, we'll give priority for student questions. And please make sure your phones are on silent, and we'll now hear formal introductions of our speaker and moderator from U Chicago student, Stephen Fowler.
Greetings all. My name is Stephen Fowler, and I'm a second-year Master of Public Policy student at the Harris School here at the University of Chicago. Today, I'm going to welcome you to today's Speaker Series event, Welcome to the Mosaic, the Rise of Black Mayors in American Cities. It was not until 1870 that the right to vote was extended to Black people, and it was only in 1965, after the passage of the Voting Rights Act, that effectively every Black person was allowed to vote. Now America's four largest cities, New York, Los Angeles, Houston, and of course Chicago, all have Black mayors for the first time in history. This new trend in American politics is a reflection of the makeup of this country, and particularly its cities. Black mayors are not a homogeneous bloc, and today's panel represents that. We are fortunate today to be joined by current and former mayors of four of the US's great cities who took a variety of approaches to govern their cities, which they call home. Each of the speakers have led their cities through adversity and crises, including the COVID pandemic, natural disasters, and civil unrest. Our first guest, Muriel Bowser, has served as the mayor of the District of Columbia since 2015. In her first budget, Mayor Bowser devoted an historic $100 million to the Housing Production Trust Fund, putting an unprecedented number of affordable housing units into the pipeline. During the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, she renamed the stretch of 16th Street in front of the White House Black Lives Matter Plaza and had a mural painted spanning the entire street. She also championed the successful launch of one of the largest and most transparent body-worn camera programs in the nation. Our next guest, LaToya Cantrell, has served as the mayor of New Orleans since 2018. Mayor Cantrell was elected as the first female mayor of New Orleans in 2017 and founded a gun violence reduction council, tasked with finding solutions to violent crime in the city. She led the city through the COVID pandemic, and in 2021, she was re-elected as mayor. Our next guest, Adrian Perkins, is the former mayor of Shreveport, Louisiana, and he is currently an IOP Pritzker Fellow. Mayor Perkins was elected mayor of his hometown, Shreveport, Louisiana, in 2018, and he served there until 2022. During his tenure, he reversed the city's $3 million budget deficit into a budget surplus of over $50 million. He was a pioneer in using data and technology to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, and his response to the pandemic was featured as a front page story on the Washington Post. Mayor Perkins also holds the rank of captain in the United States Army. He's a Bronze Star recipient, and he served 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Today's conversation will be moderated by Keisha Lance Bottoms, former mayor of Atlanta, Georgia, and also a former IOP Pritzker Fellow. Mayor Bottoms was elected in 2018 and served until 2022. During her tenure, she signed an executive order forbidding the city jail to hold ICE detainees. And in 2020, she led the city through the COVID-19 pandemic, signing an executive order to implement mask mandates, despite an order issued by Governor Brian Kemp to suspend them. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished guests.
Well, good evening. Nice to see you all. I joked, I did the fellowship last spring, and I joked that every time I come to Chicago, everyone says, you should have been here yesterday. The weather was great. So we are going to have a great conversation this evening. Hello, Mayor Bowser. Great to see you on screen.
Hi, Mayor.
Understand
Great to
that
see you too.
that your budget has kept you at home, but we're glad that you are able to take time to join us. And so we're going to jump right in. You all have heard the introductions. We have a great discussion with some wonderful leaders, some of the most extraordinary leaders that we have had in this country. So I'm glad to see you all here. And I'll just dive in. The description I thought was very appropriate for us to kick off. The description of tonight's event was, for the first time, 4 of the largest cities in the U.S. are led by Black mayors and scores of other smaller cities as well. How did we get here? Mayor Cantrell, I'll start with you.
How did we get here? Well, I would say for the city of New Orleans, I was elected the first woman in its 300-year history. But during that election, I did go into a runoff, but the community, the city had determined that their future was going to be female. So I was in a runoff with another woman. And so I think that women have proven that we can be great legislators, but we can be damn good executives. And I think that that has been proven, and we have been able to emerge because of that. People that have come before us, but demonstrating, I'm talking about that female aspect, but even in regards to Black leadership.
So I was told not to assume that the audience knows anything. So tell us about your path to being elected mayor.
So my path to being an elected mayor really started, and I didn't plan to be elected to anything, not even mayor for that matter. But I led my community through recovery after Hurricane Katrina, which led the city in recovery at the grassroots and neighborhood level. I was a community organizer. And from that work, my community encouraged me to run for city council. And the political machine at the time was against me, but the people were with me because I demonstrated on the ground, doing the work, having the grit, having the courage. And I was elected to the council, reelected without opposition. An opportunity came to run for mayor. I could have ran again for my district seat. I didn't want to be elected just to be elected. I wanted to be in that executive side to do more. And the political machine, again, was against me, but again, the people were, because of demonstrated track record of grassroots doing what it was necessary, meeting people where they are to do the job. So now twice elected mayor, the first time 61% of the vote, second time reelect 65% of the vote, but I have a recall petition happening right now.
So we're going to come back to that. Mayor, tell us about your path and how did we get here as a country?
So I have a bit of a different path. I actually ran for mayor during my 3rd year of law school. So I don't have a background as a legislator, not state, not city council, any of that. I was in my 3rd year of law school. I was very much actually planning to go to a law firm when I went to law school. But my mother says, if you want to tell God a joke, just tell him what you have planned. That did not work out for me. I ended up running for a student body president at my law school, and the video that I posted online somehow got back home. And the video, as it started to circulate, I started getting a whole bunch of phone calls with people telling me, hey, you should consider coming back home. So I compromised with him. I said, hey, I'm gonna go to this law firm. I'll see what life is like. And I will come back and do an exploratory period to see if there's an actual appetite for change in Shreveport. So I did both. And after I finished knocking on doors in the blazing heat in Louisiana, and I still had the passion and the heart to go back home, that's when I made the decision to forego going to a law firm and go back home and serve my community. And fortunately, 5 months after my law school graduation, I was voted mayor in the city of Shreveport. So pretty crazy journey for me, to be honest. And I learned a whole lot with it being my first elected position. But there is never a day that goes by where I don't have an appreciation for how I got there and how we got there. And that's just sustained work. Our country was founded in 1776, but we didn't truly become that multiracial democracy, you can argue, until the 1960s. And then it took even time for that, for us to get our first African Americans in office in these cities, to get our first African American women in office in these cities. And we have to understand that we're a part of a long line of people that put it all on the line. And I'm here right now as a fellow, so I talk to students that talk about the South, and they're so disenchanted with what they see in the moment or what they see over a cycle. And I try to constantly remind them, like, you got to realize people fight decades and decades. They fought decades and decades just for the right to vote. Just for the right to vote. So we can't be a privileged generation. We got to understand that we have to put in the exact same amount of work. And if we do that, then tomorrow's future would be much, much brighter than it is today. And that's what I hold on to every day.
Yeah, revolution's not a one-time event. Audre Lorde, which if Governor DeSantis has his way, won't be talking much about her in Florida, but I digress. So you're very modest. Black History Month. You were the first African American elected your class president at West Point. And what was that little law school you attended?
I went to Harvard Law School.
And you were also a student body president there as well.
I was. Mm-hmm.
All right.
So I had a lot of student government experience before I came to the mayor's office, which didn't count for much, by the way.
So for you students out there, the training is happening now. All right, Mayor Bowser, tell us about your path and how we got here.
Well, sure. I'm the mayor of my hometown. I think you may hear a little trend in what we're talking about, because I feel called to serve a town that has given so much to me and to my family. And I tell people frequently I'm the mayor of the best city in the world, and I believe it. And so I wake up every day working for 700,000 Americans who currently don't have voting representation in their own Congress, even though they're tax-paying Americans. I'm a third-term mayor, so I'm starting my 9th year. And some people will ask me, when I made the decision to run for a third time, people said, Bowser, third terms are hard. Are you sure you want to do this? To which I told them first terms are hard. And yes, I want to do it because we have, I think, built a great record of working on the issues that matter to DC residents. And I want to see them through in this term. I actually am the second woman to be mayor of DC. The first woman was a woman named Sharon Pratt, and she was one of the first big African American big city mayors, and she was elected back in the 90s. A tough time for cities in the 90s, and I think we learned a lot of lessons about Black executive female leadership. And the thing that I know is that women leaders, especially in executive positions, are criticized more harshly, and more wrongly. And so I feel a great, great debt to the women who have come before me, who have paved the way. That really, in many ways, allows me to stand strong in my leadership, especially as a female executive. And I think that's what you're seeing around the country and cities and towns everywhere. A lot of natives to their cities and towns are running for mayor and getting elected as mayor and bringing just a myriad of experiences to those jobs. The most recent, I think, sister in the Sisterhood of Black Mayors is from Los Angeles, who is, of course, bringing the experience from the Congress. LaToya and I came from our legislatures. And I have to say, having been 8 years as a city council person and now 8 years as mayor, I like it better on this side. And the point is, I learned early on, and I didn't always want to be mayor. I went through all the way through graduate school and didn't know that I would be in elected office. But I learned really quickly. I fell in love with local government, and I knew the fastest way to help the most people was to get myself elected. And if you love policy and you love politics, there's nothing better than being mayor of your hometown.
Well, I too served 8 years on city council, and when the new mayor of Atlanta was elected, I said to him, the only thing you now have in common with city council is that you park in the same parking deck, because it's a completely different ball game. Nothing against legislators, but when it's just you taking the headwinds, it's a very different ball game. I want to go back to what you talked about. You grew up in DC in the 90s, and I've read that you said you have more anxiety now about crime than you did growing up in the 90s when we were experiencing this crime wave across the country. And I know what extraordinary leaders you all are, because we were in the fire together during COVID and our racial justice reckoning in this country, and President Trump, and the list goes on. But we saw this spike in crime after COVID, in the midst of COVID, and then after COVID, that many cities have not recovered from. Can you talk to us about what you were doing? I know that you asked many of your community leaders for help, for ideas, which is big for a leader to ask for help. Can you talk more about what you are doing and what you hope to see happen with that work?
No, absolutely. So I think that we all recognize nationally, not just in my town or from the mayors who are seated on the stage, that COVID upended a very fragile public safety ecosystem. Just upended it. So you had schools closed, you had job training centers closed, you had the courts closed, you had people in the courts reacting to and really trying to make sure our detention facilities were safe. We just had the entire system was upended. And then on top of that, you had people isolated from their jobs, from their doctors, from their substance abuse treatment. So everything just has descended on our cities. So what we see is we have a system that's fragile and disrupted, and we have people who are really in a state, kids, young adults that have been isolated and really in need of those services. And you add on top of that more guns than you can imagine. So what my police chief explained it to me this way, and then in the 90s, he's a native like me, when we had a real tough time in DC. And it's nothing like it was in terms of the level of violence. But the number of guns and the people who are willing to use guns has taken on a random quality that scares people. And here's like one little anecdote that would explain that. In the 90s, a group of guys who, were out in the streets doing whatever, and then you come up to a group of 10 guys, you would have one of them that had a gun. Now, you come up with a group of 10 guys, all 10 of them have guns. Mm-hmm. So it's the level and how that we're attacking gun violence that has me really, really concerned. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, the anti-policing movements that we've all had to confront, fewer police officers in tougher environments, is also a concern. So as a mayor, what we're battling is making sure we have enough police that they know their jobs, that they're the right people doing the jobs, and we have systems of accountability, that we have a community that trusts each other, trusts the government, and trusts policing, and that we get our systems back on track. Courts open, schools open, programs running, and that the normal systems of accountability are in place. We also have incredible investments in prevention efforts, and the president's investments from ARP on down have been helpful with us with really historic investments in violence prevention strategies. We're 5 years in DC setting up our violence prevention strategies. And we know that continued investment and growth in those programs, we're hopeful, are also going to pay dividends in terms of safety.
And that's American Rescue Plan funds. Many of you all probably know that. Given to cities directly to cities, which gave an enormous amount of flexibility in how cities could put money towards programs like violence prevention programs, and a flexibility that we, quite frankly, had never had before.
Yeah.
So Mayor Cantrell, can you talk about how you have balanced, or what you've had to balance in New Orleans with the spike in crime, but also navigating this defund the police, we don't need that many police. How have you navigated that, and how do you explain the need for public safety to your community with
Sure.
accountability?
So in the city of New Orleans, we were on the world stage, or really the national stage, where we did not see large-scale protests and even violence as it relates to our police department. We did not, and I did not embrace defund the police strategy. When communities were pushing, saying, 8 can't wait. Well, we had already adopted the 8 policies and actually went to 12 policies in terms of policing. And even embracing ethical policing is courageous, to where our officers do peer-to-peer de-escalation. They intervene amongst themselves. And this was a practice that had been going on. So our police department has been on that main stage doing the right thing. But the balance has been with the lack of the capacity, so dealing with the shortage of officers. But as Muriel mentioned, the American Rescue Plan dollars, that has been a lifeline for my city. I don't know where we would be. We are a city primarily industry driven by hospitality and our cultural community, hit very hard due to COVID. And so due to that, we had just that overall impact, on our people. But in terms of law enforcement, the capacity there, and with these American Rescue Plan dollars and the deficits that we incurred because of our industry collapsed, it allowed us to reinvest in police, in retention, in recruitment, in ways that I don't know how we would be able to do that if that lifeline was not extended. But that's exactly why, and I know my brother mayor over here to the left, Louisiana, we're in a state where our city, I know mine, wasn't fully reimbursed with the CARES Act money. It went to the state, did not come directly to the city. And although we responded very much in terms of leading even nationally combating COVID, 70 million of our resources spent, we were not reimbursed from our state. And so we fought for direct allocation, joining hands with other mayors across the country. And so I'm thankful for the federal government, for the administration, because it's these dollars that we're able to put over 80 million in public safety today. So we're investing in ways, in a holistic approach, of course, looking at retention and recruitment, but also violence prevention strategies in terms of mental health, and that whole looking at it from a public health perspective is where we have to go. But we're able to do that and striking that balance with the resources that are necessary.
And we were fortunate in Atlanta. We were able to get CARES Act funding by the skin of our teeth. But for cities and counties that didn't get it directly, it often went to the state,
Yes.
sometimes to the county, and then you would never see a penny of it.
It was that threshold, remember?
That threshold,
population.
600,000,
Yeah,
right?
the population.
So did Shreveport receive any money? No money under
Same
CARES
boat.
Act
Yeah, we
funding.
don't have any cities in Louisiana that are over 600,000. So
So it all went to the state, and
Yep.
then where did it go?
Yeah, well, as the mayor just pointed out, a lot of it had to just stay at the state because it never came down to us, and that was a very important lesson that we learned the first time out. And we, just today I was having, or just yesterday I was having a conversation. People assume that state legislators are on the same team with cities, right? That is not the right assumption to make in Louisiana and plenty of places in the South when you have Democratic-led cities. So for that second rescue package, the ARP funds to come directly to us, it was transformational. We had the same public safety issues in Shreveport that you've heard every mayor up here talk about. And something that makes me more anxious about our crime spike opposed to what we saw in the late 80s and the 90s is the demographic that was doing it. Much younger than when I was growing up. I'm born and raised in Shreveport, Louisiana. I'm from Cedar Grove, the poorest neighborhood in the city. One of my first memories is sleeping under my bed because I heard gunfire outside and there would be drive-by shootings. So I grew up in that environment, nervous walking home from school, you name it. But the public safety issues that we have today are much scarier to me because the people doing the drive-by shooting were older and it was connected to the drug trade. And there was some kind of method to the madness that was going around us. There is no method today. As the mayor pointed out, when you walk up to a group of teens and 10 of them are armed, how do you solve those problems? So the way that we addressed it, because we too are down in manning with our police department, the way that we addressed it was with patience. Because when these public safety issues pop up, citizens don't care about the nuance at all. They just want to solve the problem right now. And what we did not want to do was revert back to failed policies of being tough on crime and trying to respond to that. So patience was very critical. And the second thing was just being innovative. We had to figure out, okay, we're not going to solve our personnel deficit overnight. How can we help the officers that are out there on the streets? And that's why we heavily leaned on technology. I came to visit my sister mayor and checked out her real-time crime center. We were able to stand up hours, one of the fastest in the country, one of the most affordable, because we were able to learn and take best practices from other cities. So we leveraged technology. And the last thing I'll say is just the compassion to solve the problem and just staying with it to solve that public safety problem. But we wouldn't have been able to do that without the resources that was given to us and without a community that came together to solve it as well. And happily, I can say in 2022, we had one of the sharpest declines in crime in the entire southeast part of the United States. We had over 40% decline in homicides, but it was because, again, we were patient, we were innovative, and we were committed to solving the problem.
So we had a tight network when I was mayor. I got kicked out of the group chats when I was no longer mayor. But I'm just curious, did you have that same network? You mentioned going to visit Mayor Cantrell.
I did. And we got multiple group chats as well, right?
Multiple chats,
so,
yeah.
So I always call my sister mayors in Louisiana, Mayor Broome as well in Baton Rouge. But I had a pretty text thread that became pretty popular. It was actually featured in Esquire magazine. Myself and a lot of other young African-American mayors throughout the Southeast, we had a text thread where we were just bouncing around ideas. And I did this with my students the other day. We talked about the challenges of mid-sized cities. We talked about the resources, and then we talked about the demands. And we just brainstormed on how to solve those problems together. I know people probably think mayors are omniscient or we got unlimited resources, but a lot of the things we saw, it was first impression for us. So we had to figure it out on the spot. Us just being regular human beings had to figure it out on the spot. And we would not have been able to solve a lot of those problems without that mayoral network and being able to bounce ideas around and watch the responses in other similarly situated cities so that we can improve upon it. So yeah, you can't even put a price on what our mayoral network does for us.
Now, what I loved about our chat, we could talk about everything from issues and how we could solve them to our hair, and you all get that granular.
It's not all politics.
Okay.
It's not all politics at all. No.
So, Mayor Cantrell, social media. We talked a little about this driving over, and how do you balance governing with all the incoming and the loudspeaker of social media? How do you balance that?
So, first of all, it really is about your personal well-being. And it's okay for me to take care of myself mentally,
Absolutely.
although some may not agree, you know. And so I don't read comments. I limit I limit it.
Do you have someone who reads them for you?
Absolutely. I get my DMs. I check my own emails now. I mean, I've always checked my own emails. Every day I don't have a backlog, but I'm talking about the vicious, dehumanizing, I don't read that. And I tell my daughter the same, stay away, because it has an impact. It can definitely have an impact on you. And that is just my way. Everyone's different, but for me, I've learned that I need to pull back off of that because I do not need the distractions, but I really do not need to be dehumanized when I know that I don't deserve that. And I'm rooted and grounded and doing the work. I don't want to be distracted. So that's my way. And it's proven to be helpful for me.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned the recall effort
Yes.
that's happening against you.
Yes.
There was an article written in a national publication that asked the question, was this because you are a woman? Because there have been men, obviously, who people haven't been pleased with, but no recall effort. Do you think that's grounded in race or in your being a woman?
Well, considering that it's funded primarily by one man who is of white privilege, who has demonstrated that he doesn't care much about Black folk, whether his restaurant shut down when Essence is in town or the Bayou Classic and the like, things like that. So he's funded this recall, $500,000. And the reports came out and he's pretty much the single donor. And so that makes me believe without a doubt that it is a part of the orchestration that we've seen throughout the country, but again, to take down Democratic mayors and of absolutely women, but me being the first woman mayor, Black, of New Orleans in the Jim Crow South, and having to make tough decisions that piss people off, quite frankly, but I saved lives. And it was proven to be the right thing because the city has bounced back tremendously because of those decisions that were made. But in regards to inflation and capacity and supply chain and, all homelessness, all of these things that we're all dealing with, public safety and the like, well, mayors, we're on the front line. We get blamed for everything. And then you tack on the woman and Black and oh my goodness, first time they having to hear no from a Black woman. It's kind of unprecedented in my city and even in my state. So I do charge it to that.
Mayor Bowser, you said we are judged more harshly. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, I have I've never, I just finished my sixth election. And so before I ran for mayor, I had 3 successful elections to our council. And all the way up until that point, I never really saw gender as having an impact in my campaigns, in my elections, any of that. But I think LaToya's point is should be well taken, because once you sit in the big chair, then you're the decision maker, and you have some people who like what you're doing and some people who don't like it. So I think that is an important consideration when we're talking about the tough jobs that we have. You're going to have people who love what you're doing and who don't. And we have to remember in our country, we don't have a lot of women in CEO roles, not in politics, not in corporations. And so we have had a lot of legislators, a lot of supportive roles, but not in the CEO role. So I do think as a nation, we have to continue to remind ourselves that women can be the CEO, can be the final decision maker, and be able to withstand the criticism. So, like, you don't hear LaToya or me complaining that we get a lot of criticism. You're not going to hear that. We're just going to work harder, and we're going to be smarter, and we're going to be bolder. And you have to do all of those things. But I do think it's important to call it out when we see it. I do think it's important to support each other when we see it. I happen to feel that our vice president is judged harshly and wrongly. And I saw for the first time women and men come to her defense when she was vying for the vice president's role. And so I see it, and I think it's important that we call it out. I frankly saw it with Hillary Clinton, harshly, wrongly, and all of the things that she argued for and warned us about, we're seeing come to fruition. And so I think it is important as women and men who care about having great people run for office, is that we call out mistreatment when we see it.
I would always say I was never so much aware of being a woman until I became mayor. I was always aware of race growing up in Atlanta and the South, and post-civil rights baby. But being a woman, I always thought that was somebody else's fight, that was not something that I needed to be concerned about. But the question that would just make me want to yell would be, who's advising you?
Yes.
When you make a decision and it's an unpopular decision, who's advising you?
Yes.
As if you didn't have the ability to think for yourself.
Or if you make a popular decision, people say, whose idea was that?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
From all sides.
Yeah.
All sides.
I had full page ads, in my newspaper, which I call were dog whistles, about rounding him up. Oh, she can't make the tough decision, or wait, who's advising? Or she thinks she's too hasty, getting there too fast.
Too emotional. Too angry.
Oh, the angry black woman. Oh, yeah.
Go down the list.
I didn't think I was meeting with my mama. I'm not your mother.
That's a different session. All right. So you were the youngest mayor in the history of your city. Any discrimination based on your young age?
Absolutely. And the strike already that I had against me, being an African American in the South. Let me back up a little bit. So we're having a conversation because right now we get to celebrate that the largest 5 cities in our country are run by African Americans. But in our state, the number of African American mayors is actually declining. And I really want to point that out because, bad ideology, discrimination, et cetera, it's not fenced in the South. So whatever dynamics are going on in Louisiana can very well spread to other states. And it's something that we should watch. But being African Americans and having the privilege of serving our city, that comes along with a whole lot. This isn't like Louisiana is not post-racial America at all. You already talked about the strikes that was against us. My second strike was not being a woman, but it was being young. And I constantly from day one got asked, who is advising you? And people would tell me, oh, he must have the wrong people advising, because I had to make.
So that's not just a woman.
No. Being 32 in office, you'll get the exact same thing. And it was frustrating. I'll give a specific example. So when the city budget that I inherited, we had negative $3.1 million of an operating budget of $500 million. Negative $3.1 million. And I didn't even know it until the summer because that's when we got our external audit. The previous administration actually did a budget that said we had a couple $100,000 in the account, which isn't good. So one of the first things I had to do was fix our budget. So we passed a trash collection fee of $7 along with the city council. And we just got it. They were like, the honeymoon is over for them. One decision. It's like the first 3 months, the honeymoon is over. They're going to break Shreveport. This government is doomed, et cetera, et cetera. And it was like that just throughout, just talking about the vitriol and the opposition when you have to make tough decisions that benefit the city. I'm in the exact same boat. I don't read comments on social media either. I read within the first week of being in office, I was reading comments and it was like N-word, N-word, N-word. First week. You know what I mean? We hadn't even passed the trash fee yet, so it was nothing for them to even be mad at me about.
What are the demographics?
So as the last census is 56% African Americans in the city of Shreveport, and I think 33% white, and the rest is other. So it's a majority African American city. But when we think about the media market and the information that our constituents get constantly in the newspaper publications, African Americans don't own those in Shreveport. I don't know, you got a couple additional publications in New Orleans, but we don't have that. So it's up to us and utilizing churches and those type of social infrastructure to get the word out about the good that we're doing for the city. But you got to imagine we're going against billion-dollar corporations, that's pushing out algorithms that pushes our worst demons to the top of our timelines.
Yes.
So it's a very, very difficult job running a city as a young African American man in the South. And, I challenge my students. I hope this doesn't scare you. I hope it's a challenge to you to understand if you want to get in the fight, if you want to go to the trenches, come to the South. It's easy being a Democrat in New York, in California. If you really want to put in the work and stave off those bad ideologies, that discrimination, the South is the place to come.
Now, I was reading during your reelection campaign, there was a commercial that was done that superimposed your face on another actor's body, use your voice, talk about disinformation. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I can't. So it's so funny. I'll tell you how I found out about it. A good friend of mine, a mayor, actually, Mayor Benjamin, texted me and said, man, I can't believe they're using facial software in your mayoral race. And I'm working so much. And remember, I'm not always on social media, that I was like, really? Who is it of? And he was like, it's of you. And I was like, what? Like, send me the article, right? So he sends me a link to it. And I watched it and I'm like, this is incredible. My big takeaways, it was a satirical thing. But my big takeaway in the back of my mind, I was like, somebody still had to pay a lot of money for this.
Oh, yeah.
And it was the first time that one of those ads had been used in our state. So I was like, who is funding, who's putting together these packs to attack us? So you point out the restaurateur, like there is a lot of people, even some Democrats that will come after you if you're an African American, if you're a woman, if you're a young person in the South. You never know where the arrows are coming from, but they're always coming. Another example, I had a recall effort in my first or second year, and it was one person. He had 3 people with him. And it was more news media at the recall press conference than there was people. Yeah. So how is that news? What exactly are you trying to perpetuate if our media seem excited about a recall opposed to supporting the government that's in place?
So, and you lost your reelection bid and you supported a white Republican in the mayor's race. What did you get pushback on that? And were you used to working in a bipartisan way?
Yeah, I really was used to working in a bipartisan way. A majority of my city council when I first came in office were Republicans. So I was used to working across the aisle. My state delegation, as a matter of fact, when I really wanted to get things done, I had to lean on a lot of Republicans to get things done at the State House. I made a decision to endorse the candidate that was best for the city out of the 2 options. The Democrat, so I don't get much for it, by the way, because I have pretty clear responses when people are like, oh, why didn't you endorse a Democrat? I quickly say that Democrat is not really a Democrat. They never endorsed one of the African American, and it's 3 of us that have been mayor of Shreveport, 3 African Americans to date. That Democrat never endorsed one of us for mayor. That Democrat never endorsed any Democratic governors running as well. That Democrat is known in the State House to being the swing vote for Republicans as well. So, I just tell him, like, the Democrat is not the same kind of Democrat as I am, and he has a history of corruption. I don't trust him to run the city for the next 4 years, so I'm going to go with the best person for the job. He was indicted a couple times as well, but in Louisiana, that's not too bad for you.
So, Mayor Bowser, what's the tagline on the tax in D.C.? Taxation without representation?
End taxation without representation.
Okay, got it. Make sure I get that right. So you have to deal with a lot just by the nature of it being DC. And I want to talk a little bit about, in the few minutes we have left, so we're going to have to go to Q&A, your time in being mayor under Trump. And what led to the beautiful Black Lives Matter plaza that leads right up to the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue?
Well,
can you give that to us in like 1 minute?
I'll give it to you in 1 minute. We know about that summer, and we had a president that I thought was off the hinges. And I had many dealings with him over the years, some okay, but some pretty wild. But in the days following the murder of George Floyd, there were protests all around the country, and DC was no different. And the president, I think, had already decided before there were even any protests that he would make DC an example for all cities. And that he would use the military, he would use federal police, he would use anything at his disposal to do it. And I felt that our city was under attack by our own country. And I also felt that our city was in danger from very hurt people, and needing to be able to gather and protest and address their government. And I was scared for them. We had the idea, we have a program in DC for murals, for street murals, murals on buildings. And we knew we had the Black Lives Matter Plaza mural, and we were looking for where we would do it. And I walked down our street from City Hall one day to go towards this church, St. John's Church, and I couldn't get down the street. My street in my city was blocked by federal police without any badges. And I decided then that 16th Street we had to take it back. And the way to do it was with public art, was with our mural. And that's what we did.
And one of my favorite pictures, and I'm sure so many other people, I think it may have been the last time we saw Congressman John Lewis in public, is he's standing there with you on that street. Well,
that's a testament to his generosity. He knew, I don't think I knew, but I think he knew that it may have been his last public appearance. And I think he felt very strongly about empowering young people. He shared with me in that visit, we were standing near the Hilton, which is right there, which we all go to for the mayor's conference. And he shared with me that that's where he stayed before he spoke at the March on Washington.
Oh, wow.
So he was reliving some of his own steps as a young person in Washington. And I think I was a vessel at that moment to say, hey, I'm at the end of my seasons of life, but I want young people are going to fix this. And so I feel very blessed to have been that person with him that moment.
All right. Well, thank you. We will end this part of the discussion, and now we are going to move to Q&A. So there will be a microphone, as you see right here in the middle. The first 3 questions are reserved for students. So when you come up, please introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Cameron Landon. I'm a second year in the college studying political science, and I'm from Savannah, Georgia. So the only way it was even possible for cities like Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago to be led by African Americans was the Great Migration out of the South into these urban centers across the country. So my question is, how are current patterns of internal migration reshaping Black power in this nation, and what does that mean for the future?
Did anyone in particular you want to answer that?
I can jump in with a theory. We were just talking about it backstage. There's a lot of reverse migration going on right now from those families that have, moved out. And the book Warmth of Other Suns is a great book that describes that migration you're talking about. But there's a lot of reverse migration going on in the South right now. As a matter of fact, I was with the Mayor of Jackson a couple days ago, and he was saying the projections on when Mississippi will become a majority minority state has actually shrunk, and it's supposed to be like within the next 2 or 3 years. The difference, though, is that those epicenters that we went to in the 20th century, was a lot of fighting that happened, but they evolved to being very fair, racially fair as far as voting goes. The opposite is happening in the South right now. The voter suppression laws that you see, the opposite is happening. So I think the translation of voting power and political power is not going to be as quick as some might think with that reverse migration. Just a theory, though, so don't quote me.
Thank you.
I love your sweatshirt, by the way. Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Christian Johns. I'm a first year Master of Public Policy student here at U Chicago. And my question really pertains to kind of how do you make hard decisions, especially as cities are more they're being forced to take on a lot more responsibilities that federal and state governments used to do, like healthcare, mental health care, a lot of different services. So how do you make those decisions in your budget day to day? And how do you communicate those tough decisions to people, especially as you notice, like being a woman mayor or being a Black mayor in general, there's a lot more criticism on top of that. How do you kind of communicate those tough decisions to your constituents?
Yeah, I think my way is just really meeting people where they are, getting into the community. I'm a community organizer. That's how I got into this. Not swayed at all by, getting people together and hearing, building consensus, really understanding what the priorities are, but coming from the people. And taking on those challenges. I mean, whether it's, of course, affordable housing and, all of these matters that we know, public safety, holistic approaches that we know that our communities need. You cannot arrest our way out of this. And so when you put money towards programs that get to root causes that are going to help young Black children and that may have overstepped the line, but we need to provide them with those resources to steer them in the right direction and off the life or path of crime. So I wouldn't say it's easy to make the decision, but it does become easier because you know that it's rooted in doing the right thing and it's serving the people who need it the most, and it's coming directly from them. So it makes it easier for me to not waver when I'm demonstrating courage to do the right thing.
And I would just add that you have to know what you believe. I think that politicians get themselves in trouble when they are all over the place and their system of governing or their approach to governing is not rooted in their values. Know what your values are. And the other way I kind of focus my work is having some of the big goals, the big buckets of work that I'm going to focus on that helps me get to the biggest goal. How can I help the most people the fastest? And how can I make sure that everybody gets a fair shot in my town? And so I focus on that bucket of work and my system of values. And then I do find the tough decisions to be easy to make because I call on my experience. I call on all of the information that I have, and I know that I have more information than my average resident. I do try to talk through the tough decisions with them and tell them why I have to make them. I have learned in my years of leadership that one of the worst things that you can do as a leader is waver. You can take time to decide, you can consider, you can even change your mind. but you can't flip-flop and waver. When you make a decision, explain why you did it, and then implement it.
Thank you.
Great.
All right, Atlanta.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Brandon Gaddafi. I'm a third-year student at the law school. I lived in Atlanta for a time. I went to Morehouse College, but I'm actually from Miami, Florida. It's another southern city. But I wanted to ask, I understand that being a Black mayor means that there's a racial dynamics going on, but also there may be class dynamics going on. And as mayors of cities, you may find yourself more aligned with the more economically advantaged populations of your city. So how do you ensure that you're protecting the interests of the economically disadvantaged, even if it may make the more economically advantaged populations of your city unhappy and may be a detriment to you politically, as far as your political future and political prospects moving forward?
Well, and you are familiar with Atlanta. When I was running for mayor, I would say Atlanta was a tale of two cities, and I've lived both those tales. So for me, growing up in Atlanta, still being intimately familiar with all parts of Atlanta, it was easy for me to process the wants and the needs, if that makes sense. So I didn't enter a room and you had to explain it to me from A to Z. Like I was already at W a lot of times. I know what it's like to live on the south side of town, and the life expectancy is 10 years less in certain areas than it is on the north side of town, and the challenges with our schools and transportation and job centers, and the list goes on and on and on. Now, my community is one of the more affluent areas on the south side, but I'm 5 minutes away from an area that's probably one of our most challenged areas in the city. We were really fortunate in Atlanta. We are home to 30, I think, Fortune 500 companies who really have invested in the people of our city. So from creating a job training program to these things I couldn't fund from the mayor's office. I could go to these corporations. And the interesting part, making assumptions about what people care about. Affordable housing is a big issue in Atlanta as it is in a lot of other cities. I assume these very wealthy CEOs, when caring, think about affordable housing. They care sometimes for different reasons. It may be because their child's second grade teacher is driving an hour from the suburbs to get in. It may be because they can't hire workers to man their businesses in the airport or whatever it is. They cared, so it made it an easy lift to get their assistance. And then just lastly, today, Tyler Perry announced $2.7 million, I think, towards an affordable housing trust fund that I introduced as a city council person, a displacement fund to pay property taxes for 20 years for people not to be displaced with rising property taxes. He's added over $2 million to that today. That is a game changer in our city, not just for seniors, but for generations. My mother just told me the story yesterday of losing our great-grandmother's house because the property taxes didn't get paid. So I think if you can find a way to find that common ground, what do businesses care about? How can you meet in the middle? And how can you make their businesses succeed while lifting communities? Then it becomes an easy lift.
Yeah, and I would say, don't assume that I have anything. I live in the hood now. Okay, I grew up single mom. I know what stretching a dollar is and what it looks like, and I bring that lived experience to the job. My city is majority renters. Okay, people living at or below poverty. Disparity gaps through the roof. So my lived experience, in my opinion, works well for me in this position as mayor to serve the people of the city of New Orleans, to move them forward. But I tell you, hey, I grew up in LA. Crack cocaine was like an eraser in my family. So I went to Xavier, University of Louisiana. That's how I got to New Orleans. If I didn't have student loan, college wasn't an opportunity for me. And I still have student loan debt. And I'm trying to say, wait a minute, I need to get on that list of public service so I can get my student loan. Like, when is this coming up? Because I've been doing nonprofit and community service all of my life.
You didn't apply
my first
for
time signing a pension was when I became mayor, and I'm not fully vested until my 5th year, which will be May. So don't assume, I'm living it. My life experience, doing the work, but that helps me because I know what it's like on the ground. And when I had to move forward with my folks, my employees, and say we're going to do a cost of living adjustment, and we're not going to spread that over the course of several paychecks, but we're going to give you a lump sum, because I understood what that lump sum meant to my family when my mother had to make that dollar stretch. And when it got her over a hump, then we were okay. So, don't assume.
That's such an interesting thing to point out as well.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
You
I'm
didn't
sorry.
apply for the public student loan forgiveness program.
I'm still trying to now.
Okay. Make sure we get you that link. All right, go ahead, man.
I was just gonna say that assumption is so important to point out, because I already pointed out the neighborhood that I'm from. I was a public servant as well coming into office, but because we're in the mayor's office and we go to like fancy events or we're on TV, people assume that we're automatically like in the upper middle class or in the upper class, and oftentimes that is an assumption that is wrong, and that also makes us different as African American mayors as well.
Absolutely.
Just because of the socioeconomic situation in our country.
Right.
So that distinguishes us from some of our white colleagues and peers that we don't have it like that. So we do have a lot of us do have a special connection to low income communities, but we can very well communicate with any class because we have to.
And when they know you don't have it, they can wait you out. They can put $500,000 towards a recall because they know you don't have it. It's a strategy in and of itself.
Absolutely.
Don't fall victim of that.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And we have 7 minutes left, so
we can go on.
We're gonna give 1 minute answers so we can answer all the questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Mayor. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good again. Can you all talk about your mayoral colleague that's not here? A lot of strange things are happening in Jackson, Mississippi right about now. And you have the situation where, they've had issues with water for quite some time. They made the case to the federal government to get that addressed. And then it seems that, like some of what you were saying before, that money came from the federal government and got held up in the State House. And the person responsible for even getting it in the first place is his control over it is being sabotaged. So can you all, and it's my understanding there's a new proposal for another kind of court system in Mississippi that doesn't look like any of the four of you who are mayors. So can you can each of you take a minute to address that, because I think that's something very, very serious that's going on right in your own backyard.
And I'll just say, if you didn't see the clip from Chokwe speaking about what just passed, pull it up. It is it's
powerful.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
One of the most extraordinary leaders. He's been sounding the alarm since I've known him about the water system in Jackson.
Yeah, and just full disclosure, it's like one of my best friends, so I'm probably gonna talk highly of him as well. But thanks to the administration for getting him that $800 million out of that omnibus bill to be able to fix his water system. But just going back to a point I made previously, don't assume that our state houses are friendly to the cities that they're supposed to support. It's the exact opposite in Jackson, Mississippi. And it started off actually before these headlines came out with a special policing district that has had more officer-involved shootings and incidents than any other municipality in the state, and they've only been stood up, I think, for like less than a year. Now it's going to the courts. The ultimate goal is supposedly they want to take over the water and sewer system so they can privatize it or do whatever they want to do with it, especially because you guys just gave them money to repair it. So it will blow your mind that this is going on in 2023, but it's very much going on in American City today.
We've got 4 minutes left, so we're going to try and get through the rest.
I'd like to address all three of you, but I'll ask our Louisiana friends here. With Steve Scalise being like the number 3 Republican in the House, does he do anything for either Shreveport or New Orleans? Is that the answer I needed?
Makes it hard, just makes it hard. But we do have a friend, I believe. I know I have a friend in Cassidy who was very instrumental and who is a partner. And so mayors, we work with everybody. It's, they say, oh, Democrat, Republican, no, mayors. We have to serve everyone. And so that's, how I operate in that regard.
Yeah, I'd second what you said. Senator Cassidy has been a lifeline for us, and I ran against him in 2020 for the Senate race, and after that race, he voted to impeach the president we were just talking about. He's voted for the infrastructure bill. He's been one of the most bipartisan senators in the Senate when you talk about Republicans. So yeah, he's been a lifeline for us, and unfortunately, you all have a Democratic Congress member. I do not have a Democratic Congress member, and my Congress member is him and Steve Scalise have not done anything for the city of Shreveport. I'll put it that way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Delana Reese, and I'm from Mississippi, but I live here in Chicago. I would like to first say thank you for your service and for your sacrifice. First, in the political environment that we're living in today, I've oftentimes found myself tired. I've run a congressional race for a Black woman, and now I'm helping out a mayoral race for a Black man. So my question to you is, how do you remain inspired, motivated, and energized to continue to do the work? Thank you.
I stay connected to colleagues like right here, professionally, but also personally. Muriel and I have had dialogue, or she'll reach out when, a headline hits just to check on me personally. But the work, I get my momentum from those who are in the trenches just like me and who have an understanding of what we face. And even when you have to make those tough decisions, the friends, they're standing right there with you to see you through. So that's what motivates me. Also, the people that we serve, I'm in it to serve. And when you can see that the work is making a difference, that's the motivation. So I stay grounded. I go to schools every week, touching those babies, looking at them because they're our future. Just find ways to be motivated.
I'm sorry that saying the next question is going to be the last, but because we have two people, one person. Okay. We've got 1 minute. And I'll just say I was inspired when I was here with you all, because it gave me hope to know that there were young people who cared about doing the right thing and being involved. It was what I needed, because I needed some therapy coming out of the mayor's office, and doing my fellowship here was therapy for me.
Think about me.
That's actually a great segue. My name is Norma, and I'm on the board of Leaders of Color here, which is an organization dedicated to getting students of color in these executive positions. Speaking of young people, what tools do you think are necessary, and what can we make sure that our students have to make sure that they get to these executive positions and these mayoral positions?
If you can see it, you can be it. And I think the exposure that students have here you can't compare it to anything else. To have mayors, to have leaders, to have the people that you all bring through here, exposing your students to opportunities. There's a student, I just did something for her last week. I don't want to say what it is, but we have stayed connected. It's nothing bad, by the way, but we have stayed connected. So I think just keep the people coming.
Yeah. And I would say just patience and will are two traits that you should have. Young lady, please don't get burned out. We absolutely need you.
We sure.
But we need all the other young people to get involved to help lift that burden off of your shoulders. And just inspiration, read about John Lewis. Beto, you pointed out an individual in Texas that fought for 21 years just for the right to vote. He went through the legal process for 20. So who am I to give up after a 4-year term? We definitely need to take time and make sure we keep ourselves healthy. But this fight, if we want our country to be the absolute best that it has to be, we still have a ways to go, and everybody needs to get involved.
So Mayor Cantrell and then Mayor Bowser will leave you with the last word.
Oh, me? Well, I would just say one tool is just the ability to listen. Listen to the people that you want to serve. And when you do that, then you'll have that ability of not only to meet them where they are, but your focus is factored in the people that you want to serve, and not thinking that, you're coming with all these tools to help people, but they're rooted and grounded in the people that you want to help. That makes sense.
Mayor Bowser.
I always give the same advice. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And that is to get on a campaign, find a candidate that you believe in, and work your heart out for that candidate. If you really want to know if you want to get into politics, on the politics side, I just highly recommend that. And then do the things, not always the traditional things, but maybe do the fundraisers, do the, speech writing. Just get involved, and you'll find that you'll get in your town or in your adopted town with the circle of people who are doing politics. And I just think that is a way to go, in Keisha's words, from A to W. And you don't always have to do all the letters. You can go from A and skip to W. If you surround yourselves with the right people, but find a candidate that you believe in and support that candidate, and win. And then they might support you when it's your turn.
Sorry.
Make it your turn. But you have to make your luck.
Oh, well, I'll just close with this. Best piece of political advice I received was, you got to always be able to go home. And I'm sorry, Mayor, you froze. You always got to be able to go home. So whatever decision I ever made as mayor, I wanted to be able to defend it when I walked into the grocery store or when I went to the Little League field. And I'm proud to say that when my term was over, I could go home. And when you're doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, then that makes it easier and makes it always easy to defend. Mayor Bowser, you froze on us. So was there anything else? Okay, you're
sorry about that.
All right.
No, I was just saying my advice, and I'll keep it short, is to get on a campaign that you believe in and work your heart out for that candidate and learn about the whole process. And one good campaign cycle will do that and give you a lot of energy.
Well, thank you all for being here this evening.